about the 9 dash line. Where is it? What is it? How did you derive it? Our claim that we will fly and sail anywhere that international law allows, we don't define that either. Do we?
No.
No. And some people say, well, that strategic ambiguity works for us, but then it's sort of hard to complain about China's ambiguity of the 9 dash line. I would love to see a think tank, somebody do a worldwide map of the global commons based on international law, which includes all the exclusive economic zones, simply not territorial seas. It says, when we say fly or sail anywhere, here's what we mean. Some of this is contested, and feel free to contest it. Good idea or not, I don't know. I'll leave it to you guys to ask that as a question. I think we need to be aware politically, and you see this in the election, there's a linguistic strategic spectrum. You can't ignore China's rise, you cannot wish it away. It is very real. And the linguistic strategic spectrum of our response is this, and I'm not going for alliteration, all these words happen to start with A. There's acknowledgement of China's power, there's adjustment, there's accommodation, and there's appeasement. That's the linguistic strategic spectrum that I see. Again, acknowledgement, adjustment, accommodation, appeasement. Now, where our policy should fall in the spectrum can be debated. What shouldn't happen is we shouldn't allow a political situation in America in which any acknowledgement is interpreted as appeasement. And there are some who would say that simply that acknowledging China's power, even prior to adjusting for it, is a slippery slope and we end up toward appeasement. I think we need to fight that. If not, and then in conclusion, there's more. We also need to focus not only on territory as we are now, but also on security. On security. China, regardless of what we think of their political system, much of what they want is what any great power under its geographical circumstances would want. Okay, the fact that they see the South China Sea sort of as we see the Caribbean, this really isn't surprising. The geographic logic of it is there on the map. China has legitimate security concerns. As countries grow, they improve their militaries. China now has interests all over the world, and it's increasingly providing some international public goods all over the world. They are not content to have us be the sole guarantors of the security of their interests. They would like to be the guarantors of their own interests. There's nothing malign in this. This is what countries want. So there's we are uneasy about a lot of China's moves for good reason. But I think that if we want to have a respectful and clear dialogue with China, we have to recognize that China's rise, in the main, is legitimate. It's about human flourishing. It's about the desire of 1/5 of humanity to live better than they've been living. So congratulations. You know, we need to be able to say this. And its growth of its military is legitimate in the main, and its security concerns are legitimate. So we need to try to find a way not only to argue about territory, but also to have some kind of way to recognize, and again, hear this question of, is this accommodation, is this appeasement? But obviously China has to be allowed to play a bigger role in building and shaping its own security environment and that security architecture. We can't simply say that nothing changes and we remain the primary security guarantor on your doorstep, and you don't have to worry about it because we are the good. They don't buy our virtue narrative because we don't buy theirs. There's got to be some movement there. The question is, what allowance could we make for China's legitimate concerns? I don't have an answer to this. That would not embolden China to seek more. This I've heard no answer for. So I will stop there in the interest of time and see if there's any time for questions. I know we're going late.
Okay.
But a big, complicated question, and as I said at the beginning, no end in sight, at least for me.
Okay, let's give Robert a big round of applause. I take moderator's privilege, and we have the next speaker just arrived.
Okay.
And why don't we do this? ICAS will hold another conference on March 2nd. I believe that's Wednesday. We have 2 speakers confirmed. Assistant Secretary of State, Daniel Russell. And also our good friend, Gary Seymour. So those 2 guys are confirmed. So we will continue this dialogue on March 2nd. With that, now we have last speaker, Honorable David Harvey just arrived. And we are running a little bit late, David. I'm sure we will continue.
Okay, thank you.
All right, just keep your seat.
Excellent.
Now, oh, David. Okay. This is Philadelphia.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody? All right. With that, Grace Kang will introduce you.
Hey, Robert.
Thanks. Thank you. Where is the other? Oh, there. That's right. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Dr. Kim, I want to thank you for this opportunity to introduce our distinguished speaker, Mr. David Hoppe. We are very pleased to have Mr. Hoppe here today to discuss the newly passed North Korea Sanctions Enforcement Act of 2016. Mr. Hoppe serves in the key position of being the Chief of Staff for House Speaker Paul Ryan. Most recently, Dave was in the private sector as president of Hoppe Strategies, a strategic planning, lobbying, and political consulting firm. Mr. Hoppe brings 29 years of Hill experience to his current job. He directed whip offices in both the House and Senate and led the Senate Majority Leader's office during the Clinton and Bush 43 administrations. Both positions oversaw and coordinated the flow of legislation through Congress, and both required working with political personalities on both sides of the aisle, as well as the White House, to achieve passage of each bill. Other Hill positions held by Mr. Hoppe include Chief of Staff to Representative Jack Kemp during his presidential bid, and Chief of Staff to Senator Dan Coates. Currently, Mr. Hoppe is a senior advisor to the Bipartisan Policy Center and is vice president of the board for Easter Seals of DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. Let's give a hand to Mr. Hoppe to welcome him.
You're here. Isn't that wonderful? Today is a holiday, federal holiday, and yet he's here. Let's give him another round of welcome.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Let me start by saying, when you're a staff member who comes to address people, you're always in a very precarious situation, because it is thought that every word you say represents exactly what your boss thinks. And as we all know, there is nobody who can represent exactly what somebody else thinks. Obviously, the speaker has been very clear in his concerns about the United States foreign policy, particularly in the last couple of years. The United States, in deciding under the leadership of the President to lead from behind in many foreign policy issues, has caused a always difficult world to become more dangerous. And that's what we are now reaping from what has been sown. And it is not simply going to stop with whoever is elected the next president. The things that have been done over the past 3, 4, 5, 6 years will continue to grow, to move, to change. Nations in the world will examine what their interests are, because they have seen that the United States has changed its approach to how they deal with them. Even if the new president decides to become much more involved and return to a leadership position for the United States, things are not going to change overnight. So we have a dangerous world, in many ways growing more dangerous by the day. Not only in the Middle East and the Far East, but you see other things going on, Russia, the Ukraine, the Baltic states, other places. These things are not going to stop. They will continue to grow and change in ways that we don't anticipate right now. So let me start off by saying, while that is a view that the speaker holds, what I will be saying from now on are my own views and should not be said to be those of the speaker. I can tell you they're not antithetical to those of the speaker, but I do not pretend to talk for him, and I can't speak for him in this regard. I can, however, speak to the direction taken by the Republican conference members in the House of Representatives. I will speak to the legislation passed, but I also speak to some other issues here. This dangerous world is, we find North Korea right now moving forward on an adventuristic path, not unlike the Chinese. The government is moving on an adventuristic path. Between the nuclear test and the missile test in the last 45 days, we have a situation in which North Korea is clearly trying to test the boundaries and see what the reaction will be of not only the United States, but I would argue primarily the United States, but also of South Korea, of Japan, of China, of Russia, of the other UN Security Council countries and other countries in the world. And they are moving and pressing, in many ways not unlike they have in the past, to see if they can't get some international attention and use that to help get some of the things that the regime in North Korea wants, without having to go beyond where they've gone thus far. Will adventurism bring the type of response they want? They don't know, but they've seen in the past that it sometimes has. And they're testing again. They watch the United States primarily, but other countries as well, and try and judge their reaction. What is their initial reaction? So this is a situation in which the United States must regain its confidence and its leadership. The United States can't do that by itself. Our ally South Korea, Japan, to the degree we can work with China on some of these issues, who probably have more leverage in North Korea than anybody else, are areas we have to look. But it has to be first of significant and leading importance to the United States government, and the Obama administration. At this point, we have not seen that that is necessarily the case, although it is 45 days roughly since over which these two actions have taken place, and one must allow for certain things to take a little bit of time. But the United States and our reaction, both in the leadership under President Obama and those who hope to lead the country in the future, must start talking about these and laying out how they will approach those who are running for president, how they will approach this future and an adventuristic North Korea. What will be done? One of the things that we did in Congress is pass and have signed into law within, I guess, on the 18th of February, if I'm not mistaken. We passed it, they passed it in the Senate, we passed it in the House virtually unanimously. There may have been a vote or two against it. And now it's been signed into law by the President. And this is the North Korea Sanctions and Policy Enhancement Act. And let me read through some of the particulars in this. I know you've seen it before, but just it helps to read through them to clarify what Congress has wanted to say on this. And it's very strong. It requires the sanctioning of those individuals and companies engaged in North Korea's proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, arms-related materials, luxury goods trade, human rights abuses, cyber attacks, and the provision of industrial inputs such as precious metals for use in North Korea's WMD, proliferation activities, and prison and labor camps. It authorizes penalties for sanctionable activities, including the seizure of assets, visa bans, and denial of government contracts, denying North Korea access to the U.S. financial system, of critical importance, and especially other countries in the world who might want to engage with them, of critical importance to them. As people know, this was some of the sanctions that were put on Iran that actually had some force and effect on Iran. They have now been lifted in most cases, but they had a real impact on Iran, because being able to deal with the United States and the United States financial system is critical to any country in the world. Calls for a determination as to whether North Korean banks and government entities are primary money laundering concerns. This is called by some the financial death penalty. Seizes any assets connected with North Korea's proliferation, illicit activities, and human rights violations. Requires enhanced inspection requirements for ships that carry North Korean cargo. Requires the administration to develop a strategy to promote human rights in North Korea, including a list of countries that use North Korean slave labor, and requires a report on North Korea's vast prison camp network. This is an attempt to reach, not only financially and militarily, but into the culture and the ethos of North Korea, where the people are used as pawns and slaves of the government to achieve government ends. And this is a very broad and encompassing bill that was passed and signed into law by President Obama. So not only does the Congress believe this, but the administration has now said they will support this. Now comes the tough part. Now comes the necessity for the administration to act through the State Department, through the Department of Defense, through the Treasury Department, through the Commerce Department. All of these departments will be involved in carrying out this law if it's going to have the impact that the Congress wants it to have, and that it can have in starting to change the relationship, not only that the United States has with North Korea, but that other countries have with North Korea. Because when you start getting into the financial system, then you start having an impact on people throughout the globe. And that's where the U.S. impact can be spread much further and more effectively in many ways than it can simply by saying the United States won't deal with them in defense, but of course it would. But there are other countries who will hesitate before they act if the United States, through the Treasury Department and other ways, is actually carrying out what is said and has been passed into law in this